for part 2 of The Scarlet Stocking Spy. When last we left the book, her brother was clutching his musket as cannonballs screeched overhead, waiting for the command to attack the British redcoats on foot. "Cannons!" Mattie Rose cried out as she tore downstairs. "Mother, do you not hear it?" "Aye, child," she answered calmly, trying to spin as usual. "Be brave now. Let's get to thy work." Mattie Rose tried not to think what those thundering cannons meant. She began pounding raspberry leaves as hard as she could, but the harder she pounded, the louder the cannons roared. Kaboom! Boom! She yanked the tea kettle from the crane and spun around with the teacup in her hand just then. Kaboom! Kaboom! Mattie Rose jumped, and the precious teacup flew from her hand and smashed into 100 bits and pieces. This teacup has been mentioned several times, and the fact that it has just smashed in a million pieces, I think the author's trying to tell us something about how things have changed and how the connection maybe to the father has been broken. War breaks things. The blazing cannons kept up their deadly attack back and forth across Brandywine Creek till midday. Then came the command to charge, and the air became thick with the crack of muskets, the hiss of lead balls, and the acrid stench of gunpowder smoke. But Mattie Rose could not hear this part of the battle from where she was, at Ross's upholstery shop, ripping out seam after seam, unable to concentrate on the required 16 stitches per inch. "Mattie Rose, those seams can wait," said Mistress Ross kindly. She was a mild-mannered Quaker woman whose husband had fallen too. "The Tidewaters just docked from the Carolinas. Run down to the harbor and fetch my order of cotton batting and bindings." "Yes, ma'am," answered Mattie Rose eagerly. She needed to survey the harbor, for Jonathan would come soon, after dark. Mattie Rose's sharp eyes swept over the many ships crowded along the wharf. She memorized their positions, and which would be petticoats, which would be stockings with toes up or down, but on this day she was startled to see many stockings would need the cobblestone weights. Quickly she fetched Mr. Ross's order, but before she left, something made her look across the Delaware toward New Jersey, and her heart nearly stopped. For there, in the middle of the river, hiding among the many moored ships, sat a British man-of-war. "Jonathan must know this," she gasped. Mattie Rose raced back and set to work. It was the heaviest clothesline she'd ever hung. But that night Jonathan didn't come. Yet Mattie Rose kept watch for him long into that black night. He didn't come the next night either, or the next, nor the one after that. More and more nights passed, yet she kept looking for him from her window, never losing hope. Then one night a shadowy figure stood in Jonathan's place. She snuffed out her candle and peeked over the darkened sill. Who was he? Could it be Jonathan? But when he saw her window go dark, he turned to leave. Mattie Rose didn't even stop to think or slip on her shoes. She bounded after him, darting in and out of the shadows between the lampposts, stalking him like a silent cat in her stocking feet through the damp streets. "Jonathan," she whispered hopefully, shyly touching his cloak. "Is that you?" The stranger turned and smiled. "I'm Seth," he answered, "and by the looks of your feet, you must be little Miss Scarlet Stockings, Jonathan's sister." "You know him? You know my brother?" she choked. Her face flushed and her throat tightened as she waited for Seth's answer. But Seth was silent. Damp night air drifted in from the Delaware River, brushed against Mattie Rose's burning cheeks, and seeped into Seth's eyes as he stared hard into the darkness. Then solemnly he bowed his head and spoke in a low voice. "I'm proud to say that I did, miss." Slowly, Seth handed her a bundle. With trembling hands, she reached out, and for a few moments they held the bundle together. Then Seth spoke softly. "I know your clothesline code, miss," he said. I've come to take Jonathan's place. Mattie Rose nodded slowly as tears spilled from her eyes. She tried to hold her chin up as her father would have, but it drooped as her bottom lip began to quiver. "We'll not fail, miss," Seth vowed. "I promise you that." And then he was gone. Back in her darkened room, Mattie Rose slowly untied the bundle. It was Jonathan's blue coat. Tenderly, she let her small fingers explore the blue wool serge until she found it, a stiff, dried bloodstain. Then, with her littlest finger, she lightly traced 2 letters on the pewter buttons. U.S. "Us," she whispered in the dark. "For us, dear brother. For all of us." That night, and for many nights to follow, Mattie Rose sat in her tiny room, lit by a single candle, threaded her needle, and sewed. She was making an American flag from her scarlet stockings, her white petticoats, and her brother's blue coat, and sewn into every one of her stitches was a tear of grief and the clenched fist of defiance. Through that bleak, cold winter that followed, Washington's army retreated to Valley Forge while the British occupied Philadelphia lock, stock, and barrel. At night, the redcoat invaders celebrated with military balls and fancy cotillions. During the day, they patrolled the streets, eyes forward, never noticing a young girl's unmentionables hanging overhead on a small clothesline from a third-floor window. In the spring of 1778, the British left Philadelphia, crossed the Delaware, and were sent running by Washington's army. At the Battle of Monmouth in New Jersey, the patriots of Philadelphia celebrated, flying flags everywhere. But there was one little flag that hung by itself on a small clothesline high over Apple Tree Alley, and fresh spring breezes traveled from New Jersey and found the little flag and lifted it up high. How proud and strong it flew, just like her father's chin, for it was Mattie Rose's scarlet stocking flag. Many years have passed since the spring of 1778. No one knows for sure what happened to this little flag, but if by chance you find it in an old trunk or a dusty attic or barn loft or musty museum basement, you would notice that one star is bigger than the rest. It sits in the place of honor at the top of an arch of 13 stars in a field of blue, the Keystone Star for Pennsylvania. And if you looked under that star, you would find a musket ball hole. I hope you enjoyed that story. Seems to me that one of the recurring themes of these books is that kids had to grow up quick during a war, and there was lots of things that kids could do to help their parents and their brothers and sisters. Maybe that's true for us right now. Be well. Miss you.